Welcome to One Tired Teacher, episode 279, Observation, Evaluation, Season Survival Guide. How to stay grounded when you're being watched. Okay, this is not anyone's favorite time of the year. This time of year can be really stressful and feel super overwhelming and sometimes even defeating and demeaning. So today we're going to talk about how to survive this time of the year. Hope you stick around.
Welcome to One Tired Teacher. And even though she may need a nap, this teacher is ready to wake up and speak her truth about the trials and treasures of teaching. Here she is, wide awake. Wait, she's not asleep right now, is she? She is awake, right? Okay. From Trina Devery Teaching and Learning, your host, Trina Devery.
Hey, so we're going to have an honest talk about teacher evaluations and protecting your confidence, because it's really important to remember that we are not a score. We are not a test score. We are not a weight score. We are not a salary score. We are not a score. Whether someone says we're effective or highly effective or needs improvement or whatever, those words are just words. They don't define you. They don't define who you are. And sometimes those words can be really unfair. Sometimes we're like, yes, they got us. They nailed it. They saw what we were trying to show them. Sometimes it feels like the way that the system was set up feels like it's not supposed to go that way. I don't know. I just know it's hard to do something when someone's watching you, unless you are an actor and that's the job you chose. So that feels a little different. Although I probably am guessing even professional actors feel like they don't love to have people watching them do something, or they don't like to watch themselves do something. I think that's always interesting when they don't want to see the playback. Like they don't want to see how it went. They're just going to leave it up to the director and they're going to cut it how they're going to cut it, and they let it go there. I always think that's so interesting. Anyway, how do we survive this? Like, what do we do about this? I know for me, I've talked about this actually on TikTok. So I created this video years ago about a friend of mine who was an outstanding teacher, and she had gotten moved to a different position and she was going to be evaluated on a new rubric. And we were just like, oh my gosh, are they not going to give you highly effective? Are they not going to give whatever? And we got, really worked up about it. And I was really worked up about it. And I used to get so obsessed about this. And I'm like, I have to get highly effective. I have to get it in every single category. Da, 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 da. That's crazy. And I realized after stepping away from that, like how unhealthy that is, how unhealthy that was for me, and how that doesn't dictate who I am or what kind of teacher I am. How my children felt about learning, that's what matters. How they did in the classroom, like, whatever. How they went on to live as a learner and as a person and growing in society, that's what matters. It's just so hard with this system. And part of it comes down to a lot of districts use the Charlotte Danielson rubric, which was not intended for like an evaluation type purpose. It was for an evaluation, but not a paid purpose. So if they were using these evaluations to help teachers grow, then it would be a little easier to handle getting feedback that indicates you need to improve in an area or you got some work to do. And I think people would be open to it. I know I tried to look at some of the things and think, okay, how can I do a better job of this? If I'm going to prepare my kids for an advance, I'm going to share in advance what the criteria is in advance. That's really powerful and really helpful to kids. Or if I have to use higher level questioning, that's helpful. So I didn't mind learning those things and improving upon my practice. What I didn't like was feeling like everything was tied to that. And some things I didn't have control over as far as how well kids did on tests. I could do the best I could teaching, and I might be really effective at teaching. But if they didn't get enough sleep last night, or if they have a toothache, or their mom has cancer, there's nothing I can do about that. And so it doesn't feel fair. It doesn't feel like a fair evaluation. And that's really tricky. And also it's really hard when, like I said, when someone's standing over you watching, you get self-conscious. You can't help but get self-conscious, especially when you feel like they're there to see what you're doing wrong and not necessarily what you're doing really well. Another part that really irritates me is that a lot of teachers don't know the rubric, which is you've got to know the rubric. That's the key. You want to know the rubric. But the thing is that principals don't know the rubric. Or if they don't see it in that 45-minute lesson, then it doesn't exist, which is not fair. And that's not how Charlotte Danielson intended it to be. She indicates in her book that if they don't see it in that observation or in the evaluation, like in the walkthroughs or in the formal evaluation, then teachers are allowed to bring that in the follow-up or the, is that what it's called? The follow-up? That doesn't sound right. I can't think of what it's called. The meeting that you have, it makes sense that it would be a follow-up, but I don't remember if those are the exact terms. But you should be able to defend yourself. You should be able to provide evidence. And a lot of people don't do that. And a lot of teachers don't fight for that. But let me tell you, you got to almost be like an attorney. Like, here's the evidence. And how are you going to prove that I didn't do this? And that's kind of a mentality I think we should look more for is, what am I doing right? Not what am I doing wrong? So how do you survive this situation? I really get so frustrated about this on TikTok. So if you want to check that out, you can. I get really mad. I actually cuss a little bit. I feel protective of teachers. I feel protective of myself. I don't feel like it's fair. I don't think it's always fair. I feel like there's better ways of doing it. That's another thing I talk about in the TikTok. I think if admin went in, did even a short read aloud with a class, they would get so much information themselves by doing the lesson themselves, because they would understand the classroom community. They would understand what kind of questions the kids were asking. They would understand how systems were run, what kind of procedures were in place. They would get so much information just by being in there themselves. But they would think they don't have time for that. But if they were going to take time to do all these walkthroughs and all these observations, then why couldn't they take time to do something that would be so much more meaningful? That's my question. But that's another thing. Like, it's a waste of their time as well. When you do it year after year after year after year, is it necessary? Do you need to do that every single year? Or do you do that when you're having a question about something or after it's been several years? That made more sense to me when it was like every 5 years. I'm like, okay. I mean, maybe a lot could slip through that. So maybe you say every 3 years, but every year, it's just so taxing on all the people. And it's so much work, all the paperwork. Oh, I remember taking days off just to get the paperwork done, which is ridiculous. That was really more about me feeling like I didn't want to be rushed and I wanted to think things through. And if you want to gift yourself a day, then grab my free day of subplans so that you can do that without having to worry about subplans. If you want longer than that, then I have a subplan bundle for you, and I'll link to it in the show notes. All right, so the first thing to do to survive this is we want to think about it. We don't want to set ourselves up for anything that's like crazy that's going to happen. I usually tried to pick a literacy lesson or even a math lesson. And I didn't want to use a ton of technology. If I wanted to show I was using technology, I did something that was relatively simple and practiced it and made sure that it was available and it wasn't going to cause a mess. And I had a plan B, always had a plan B, because if it didn't work, then I needed to show that I was able to move on to something else without it going into utter chaos, which is on the rubric. So one of the things that I wanted to always make sure that I was doing was I was having like an effective lesson. So I was, doing almost like a little review. I was going over the criteria. We were discussing the essential questions. We might do a high engagement strategy, like a turn and talk, or a round table where we went around the table and talked about what we learned previously, maybe what we want to learn, even something like that. And then moving into the lesson, everything was really structured. So moving into the lesson, making sure that I was using, again, high yield strategies. So I didn't want just one child raising their hand. I wanted my administrator to see that more than one person was working at a time, that if a turn and talk is 50% of your kids are engaged. It's 100%. You've got 50% talking, but the other 50% are actively listening. So it's 100% engagement. If you have, teams working together and you've got one person reporting for the team, one with the 4 groups, you're talking about 25% of your class actively engaged rather than 1%. So I think that can be really important. I also think it's really important to remember this isn't a test of you. It's a snapshot of a moment in time. And sometimes those moments are great and sometimes they're not so great. I also I'm not above bribing my students. I will tell you that right now. Yes, I'm like, if we can get through this lesson with, so-and-so is coming to see you and see how you do and how you're working. And I've been telling them how great you are. I don't scare them. I'm not trying to make them afraid they're watching you, because that intimidates me. Why would I want to intimidate my students? I want to say, I've been bragging about you all and I can't wait for them to come see. And I can't wait for them to see that, yes, I have the best second grade class, or yes, I have the best students in the school, or whatever. A little flattery, a little bribery works. And if you can show them that, if we can get, cubes to the top of the jar, we're going to have a pajama party, or we're going to have 10, 20 extra minutes at recess, or whatever you have to do. It works like magic. It really does. And it really matters. The other thing is, I will hear people say things like, I don't want to put on a dog and pony show. And, there was a little bit of time in my teaching career where I felt that way too. I was like, I don't feel like putting on this big display of whatever, and it's so overwhelming. It feels competitive and this and this and that. But then somebody said something to me that I thought made so much sense. And they said, if you had company over for dinner, would you just leave everything like you normally have it? Mail on the dining room table, maybe a cabinet open, haven't, cleaned up dog toys by the couch? Or would you straighten up? Would you put the dog toys away? Would you fluff the pillows? Would you put the mail in your office? Would you open the door with your workout clothes on? Or are you going to have your outfit for your friends or family that are coming over? That's how you kind of want to think about it. Like, I got to clean up for my family to come over and have whatever you're having, dinner, pizza and game night. I'm not going to have it. And they're my family. It's okay if they show up and I've got stuff out. That's fine. But if I plan a night for them to come over, I want to show up. So that's one way of thinking about it. So you don't feel like you're putting on a dog and pony show. You're actually cleaning up for company. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. The other thing is, you want to be prepared for the observation, because if you're not prepared, you're going to feel frazzled and discombobulated and frustrated and easily triggered, or at least that's what happens to me. So be prepared. Know your lesson, know your content, know what you're going to do, know what you're going to say, know how it's going to roll out, go through it in your mind, move through it with everyone's at PE. Stand in front of the room, think about how you're going to ask questions, think about making sure they're higher level questions about, ways that you can show that kids are also asking questions or that they're supporting one another. I know that was another area on the rubric, or teaching each other something. That's a really helpful one to do. I remember one time I had one of the things on the lesson was about classroom community. On the rubric. And it was, if you had, kids taking ownership of their space and showing like leadership. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like, how can I meet this objective on the rubric? How can I be highly effective? That's what I wanted, highly effective. How can I be highly effective? And I made a safety captain. So that was one of the classroom jobs, was safety captain. That way, when in my observation, there was somebody, and this happened accidentally, but this was because I had thought through things. But someone left their chair out, and the safety captain is like, so-and-so, you left your chair out and someone might trip. And they came back and they did it. And I was like, let's say thanks to Timmy, our safety captain. Check, highly effective on that part. So that's what I mean. You're thinking things out. You're kind of that's a great thing to do with your team. Brainstorm, things, scenarios, questions, lessons, whatever, with your team to figure out what can I do? What can I show for that particular part of the rubric? That's just one idea. Another idea I have, besides if you need to take a day for sub, my fairy tale unit is actually written with all the like essential questions, higher level thinking, scaffolding framework, specific questions inside the unit. I did that. It was like written for a highly effective lesson, which I got repeatedly with those lessons. So if you need a framework, use that as a framework. Use the fairy tale, folktale, fable unit as a framework. I'll drop the link to that in the show notes as well. Remember, control what you can. Plan a lesson it's true to your teaching style. So if you do use mine as a framework, make sure you make it yours. Like I don't mean steal it. I mean, make it do what you naturally do, because when you're trying to do what someone else tells you to do, you don't have ownership over it anymore. And then you feel like you're not authentically you. So I remember that too as my first year teaching, and my mentor teacher was like, do this lesson was something about using glue and food color and whatever. And I'm like, what is the objective? I couldn't get my head around it. And I'm like, I can't do this lesson. This isn't me. This is you. This isn't me. So just keep that in mind too. I do think that matters. And also just remember, you are not a score. You're doing the very best you can. It is good enough. And if something doesn't go right, show how quickly you can respond to that, how quickly you can pivot, how quickly you can address it. You have a behavior issue, address it, because that's on the rubric as well. So I haven't looked at the rubric in a long time. I just remember all these parts of it because in the end, towards the end of my, in the school system, I was a student support specialist, and I went with my principal on all these evaluations and helped him. And honestly, I was constantly in his ear pointing out things he missed. I'm like, you missed this. Did you see this? This was happening. Look, this is on the rubric. And 97% of the time, I helped the teacher. I can think of one time that I was like, oh, but, and I'm not proud of that because it's a weird system. It does something weird to you where you feel like, oh my gosh, was I looking for the negative? So you have to be really intentional as the administrator and as the teacher, because it doesn't feel like a system that's meant to celebrate your strengths. But you can celebrate your strengths, and you can point out things that you do that are intentional, and always go back to that rubric, because they can't argue the rubric. Just keep your head up. Remember who you are. Remember what you do. It all matters. And if you've got something to work on, that's okay. You can work on it or not. That choice is yours. You are a great teacher, even if no one comes in and notices. How many times does that happen? We have the best lesson ever and they missed it. They miss it all the time. Sometimes you just have to show it to them. I hope that helps. Until next time, sweet dreams and sleep tight.